Welcome to the ConfigureITDone Podcast. The ConfigureITDone Podcast is a place where successful thought leaders in the SAP space come to share their leadership styles, their tips, and their unique stories on how to run successful large-scale SAP programs. Listen to the podcast to learn from their successes, their failures, their career stories, and their inspirations.
This podcast is in partnership with the Black Dog Institute, who aim to create a mentally healthier world for everyone. If you wish to support the cause, please donate via the link below.
Season 5, Episode 3 of the ConfigureITDone Podcast. Just then, I cannot believe we're nearly halfway through the fifth series. It's unbelievable. But I've got my colleague Bethany. You've flown in from Melbourne.
Nice to be here.
It's good. And you've invited a guest today.
So this is Aiden Brecknell, who is the COO of SUSE.
Good morning.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
All right. So how will you normally start the podcast, Aidan? I'm going to ask Bethany to ask some quick fire questions.
Okay.
So for those of you at home that don't know Aidan, you're going to get to know him a bit now. So over to you, Bethany, if you want to fire away with the quick fire questions.
Perfect. Right. There's only a few of them. Full name.
Do we want middle names?
Full name.
Okay.
Middle name, everything.
Okay. So full name, Aiden Grant Brecknell.
Okay, perfect. And do you have a nickname?
I do. It's AB.
Perfect. And where are you from originally?
From Brisbane.
I didn't know that. There you go.
Yeah, Brisbane, Australia. Yep.
And how long have you been in Australia? I'm assuming the answer is your whole life.
I mean, look, my whole life. I did work and live in California for a little while, but yeah, primarily Australia. That's
Did you enjoy California?
Loved it.
Very different. And where are you currently working?
So I'm working for a company called SUSE, SUSE, because we get asked a lot, how do you say the name? How's it spelled? But
I did struggle at first.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually a YouTube video on how to say the name. So yeah, SUSE.
I'm grateful for that, actually. Favorite music or film?
Favorite music or film? Look, I mean, this is a weird one, but I think my favorite film is The Castle. It's very Australian. Very Australian. You haven't seen it? You haven't seen it yet, have you?
Is that the it's got an Australian family and they have their house is going to be knocked down to make way for an
Correct.
airport. I have seen it.
Yeah.
Have you?
I thought you were pretending it.
No, it's actually a really funny film. So no, it's definitely one of my favorites. Yeah.
I'm going to not pretend to say I haven't watched it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Of course you have.
My husband showed me when I first moved here. He was like, "Oh, this is like a classic Australian film." It was okay.
Yep. Only Australians understand it. That's the problem.
I noticed. Favorite restaurant?
Cafe Sydney. I went there again recently, and it's just an amazing view. I mean, the food's good too, but it's just a special place.
We was there last week. I think it was, Andrew. Yeah, 2 weeks ago for an incentive. It's brilliant. Yeah, the view's unbelievable.
Yeah. I didn't fly out for that one because we had the SAP event happening, so I skipped it, and I was really jealous. I was very jealous. Favorite destination?
Favorite destination. So, I mean, this is not that exciting, but in all honesty, my favorite destination I think is Fraser Island. I go there probably once a year at least, and I think the thing I love about it is it's an island, but there is no phone reception, right? So I can go to this island, turn my phone off, turn the email off, and completely disconnect.
I would imagine you would need that once in a while.
Yeah, it's a great place.
If you could describe your management style in one word, what would it be?
I think probably pragmatic is what kind of comes to mind.
Interesting.
And the reason I say that is I think, as leaders in the business, we often have to make a lot of decisions, obviously. And I tend to try and make those decisions fairly, but probably more based on, the data, right? Rather than the emotions of it all. So, yeah, I think I try to be, pragmatic in most of the things I do, in a fair way.
Yeah, really interesting. I like it. Bucket list thing to do.
Yeah, so I'm terrified of heights.
Me both.
Yeah, and me.
I don't like them. So my bucket list item, I think, is I'd jump out of a plane with a parachute. But
Bungee jumping?
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
I don't know if I could do it.
Apparently bungee jumping is worse than skydiving.
Yeah,
because you get the
ground rush.
you get yanked all the way back up.
I think you'd have to
that'd be
push me.
terrifying.
Yeah, I think I'd do it. But
you'd have to be shoved out the plane.
Yeah, 100%.
If you weren't currently at SUSE and in the SAP ecosystem, what would you be doing instead?
Can we assume I have money? Like I don't need to make a certain...
We'll go with that, yes.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think I would just travel, honestly. I would just travel. Yep.
So no work, no nothing, travel.
I would travel, and I'd probably look at something I could volunteer for that I actually felt fairly strongly about. And I think that's what I'd do. Assuming
that you had the money.
I don't still owe the bank lots of money.
Yeah, fair.
Which I do. Yeah.
And last one, fun fact about yourself.
A while ago, I got into a sport called surfboat rowing and rowed competitively for that. And as part of that, qualified as a surf lifesaver. So, yeah, that's what.
Wasn't there a surfing event recently?
And what definitely wasn't me.
Che?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, that was Che.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
there you go. I was looking at you like you would understand some of the lingo, but no.
Me and surfing, I've tried it once, and I had all the gear, full wetsuit,
I had no idea.
surfboard, and literally felt like I'd been in a ring with Mike Tyson. It was, it was terrible.
It takes a lot of balance. It's exhausting. I've only done it once, and absolutely not. Never again.
No, it's a fun sport.
Excellent. All right, Aidan. Well, that was brilliant. It's good to get to know you a little bit better. I want to jump into your career first and foremost. Now, Bethany told me the other day that you're still very, very young. You're 36, and you're in obviously a C-suite position, which is very, very impressive at that young age. Was this something that you kind of planned, or did it organically happen?
I think it was always an objective, but not necessarily planned. I think, Bethany, you and I have spoken about this before, actually. I think as I've gotten into, organizations, and as you both know, spent, 5 or so years at SAP, regardless of whatever the title was, I sort of knew pretty early on that I wanted to be in a position where I could influence the outcome of the business. And so, look, you can absolutely do that to a certain extent in other roles, but I think for me, getting to, whether it be a C-suite or, a leadership role, it was just the ability to, make and influence decisions that could have the biggest impact. So that's sort of what's motivated me.
Where'd that drive come from? Like, what makes you want that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to my family, actually. So my family have always run and owned an engineering company up in Brisbane. So, they've had their business now for 40 plus years. And I think it's been interesting to watch them do that. And I worked for that business for a period as well. And I think that's motivated me a lot, and particularly see my parents, the discipline, the way they've managed, the economic cycles as they've kind of gone up and down. It's been a massive motivation of mine.
Sure. How did your parents get into that?
Look, I don't know. I think, look, my father's a mechanical engineer, and I think most of my family, extended family, have sort of owned and run businesses. I sort of decided to break away from that and sort of do my own thing. But yeah, definitely.
The principles would still be there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think for me, I've tried to take the small business kind of mindset into whatever I sort of do, and I suppose what I mean by that is, when you own a small to medium business, every decision you make, particularly on, whether we spend or, suppliers or staff, whatever they can have a huge impact. And I think when you work for bigger organizations, sometimes you can not sort of treat that money like it's your own. Mm-hmm. So I'll sort of try to take those principles, if you look at it that way, and, as much as possible, apply them to, whatever role I'm in.
Love that. Really interesting. So that gets us to today. Mm-hmm. So what drew you to SUSE specifically?
I mean, SUSE, as you know, look, we have a tremendous partnership with SAP, and I was working for SAP at the time. SUSE listed maybe a year and a half ago, sort of give or take, and just in a really interesting phase as a business. An opportunity came up as a COO to kind of take some pretty significant investment, and a sort of 3 to 5 year growth program, and really lead and drive that. So for me, it was just an awesome opportunity. Big challenge, lots to do, but for me it felt right, and it's been an awesome decision.
What are the differences between working for the mothership SAP and a company like SUSE?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a lot of differences. We're obviously a much smaller business. It typically means that we're wearing lots of different hats. Right? So I think if you come into a business like SUSE and you aren't willing to, sort of be humble, roll up your sleeves and be willing to really do, whatever it takes in any job to see the business successful, it's not going to be the place for you. Not to say there's not, people at SAP that do that, but there's just a lot more people. There's a lot more resources. So we're just at a different stage as the business, and I think that's probably the biggest difference.
And I can see where your background that you spoke about before with understanding how to wear a lot of different hats and run sort of a smaller business would apply really well to your current role.
Yeah, definitely.
Really interesting.
The question that we've asked previous guests as well is around success. Obviously, everyone has a different definition of success, but how would you define success?
Funnily enough, we just spoke about this, didn't we? So I think my view on success has changed pretty significantly over the last sort of decade or so. I think, particularly as guys, in our 20s, I think, for me at least, I was incredibly career focused. Not to say I'm still very career focused, but I probably wasn't as balanced, right? And so I haven't got this perfect yet, but the way I look at my life is I've got different buckets. I try to be self-aware enough where if maybe I'm investing too much into one bucket, leaving some others dry. And so for me, success is probably just having some decent balance, right, across, the career stuff, the personal stuff, the kind of self-care stuff. That to me is, if I was to look back in 10 years' time, if I'd managed to get that at least close, I think that for me would be success.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. That's really good, that kind of bucket analogy.
Yeah, I really like that. That's something we can probably apply really well with the team, actually, because it's funny, we're very anti-hustle culture now, I've noticed, but I think there's a time and a place for it. Like there are points in your career where you have to hustle and work really, really hard. And sometimes you end up a little bit burnt out, but as long as you can get yourself to a place where you can learn to balance it better, then you're gold.
Yeah, I think it's a self-awareness thing, but also I've been fortunate to have a lot of really good mentors throughout my career as well, and in life, and I try wherever I can have the opportunity to do that for others as well. And having those good mentors that can be really, really honest, really upfront, and where maybe you are out of balance, right? Because we all are at times, be willing to point that out. So
I feel like I can learn a lot from you, Aidan, especially with that perspective piece. Like, was there a significant moment where you changed from being 100% career to more, okay, there's 4 or 5 different buckets here where is there a significant moment? Or?
I don't know there's a significant moment. I think particularly for guys, it's probably an age thing, right? I think we talked about this as well. I think maybe we don't necessarily grow up until we're maybe 30. Right? Is it a fair
saying nothing?
A fair assessment? But,
I'm still learning.
But no, look, I don't think it was a significant event. But I just think as you get older and you have life experiences and those sorts of things, and you meet different people. I think it just probably gives you a little bit more kind of perspective and balance. So as I said, look, I haven't got that right yet, but it's a focus of mine.
And it takes a while anyway. I think with anything new that you learn, it's always going to be, have you seen those graphs about like success and how we think it's like this, but really it's up and down? I think it's the same with learning how to balance. Like you have days where you're really out of balance and you burn yourself out. And as long as you can bring yourself back into balance, it's fine. Yeah. As long as you can recognize it. So what keeps you performing at your peak? Like, are there courses that you take? Is it checking with mentors? Like, what is it that helps you to really stay at your peak?
Look, I'm not always at my peak, so that's
fair.
That's one of the first one. But I think for me, probably always been and have become even more ritualistic, because for me there are days, and probably like days where I'm not necessarily feeling that disciplined, or I'm not, you may not have the motivation. You could be tired, burnt out, whatever, right? So for me, I've tried to be very ritualistic in my day and kind of what I do. And they're kind of like, I suppose, a few things that I've just got locked in my calendar now that I do. I sort of spend first 30 minutes of my day just trying to learn something new. And it may not even be work stuff. It could just be, whatever. It just something that could be a topic of interest. And that's the reason I do that is it just helps me to keep myself probably mentally sharp. Just learning something a little bit different. Exercise has been a massive part of my life. I basically put that in the calendar now. And I find that if I go a day or two without doing something, I'm not the best version of me.
Yeah. When it's something that you really highly value, you have to put aside the time for it, or you won't feel like yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So look, that's been a big thing for me, and I prioritize it. So it's got to be something really, really important. Otherwise, I'm going to follow through with that. I think the other two things. One is look, typically during the week, I try to just not drink. That for me has just been a recipe that's kind of worked for me. I mean, looking at, we all have functions and those sorts of things, but for me, that's just been something that's worked for me to, through those weeks that are really busy, to just try and do that. And the last one is I actually try not to work weekends. That's kind of
The buckets.
Yeah, it's to do with the buckets. It is to do with the buckets, because I used to do it a lot. I used to work a lot of weekends, and look, I still do from time to time. But for me, I just need that reset, and I find that I go into Monday, feeling better, sharper. Not always, but most of the time.
Yeah. That's something we try to do. I'm really bad at that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just on that point, one of my favorite books is that Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've
Love that
James
book.
Clear, and it just seems like you've got a lot of good habits, like with the exercise and learning something new every day. So yeah, definitely read that book. You'll get a lot from that.
It's brilliant.
And the learning something new, actually, I don't know how I came across it. It was this article I read about. It was actually about second languages, and it was about if you learn something new, whether it be a second language or something else, the effects in the brain in terms of avoiding, Alzheimer's and those sorts of things, they're massive, right? So that's kind of been the driver for me to, try and, keep myself in check.
I also think it leads to a lot more interesting conversation if you have something new to add, because it's like if every conversation you have is just about sort of low-hanging fruit, it's really hard to deepen relationships with people, including in business. You have something to default back to if you've learned something new that day.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I understand you've got a sales background.
Yep.
Now, obviously, we know that sales is the number one skill set in demand. What advice do you have to SAP consultants, around sales?
Yeah. So you're right. I mean, look, sales is, no matter what your role is, you're selling something, right? Regardless if you're labeled a salesperson or not. If I look at my background at SAP, and there are a lot of really talented consultants at SAP and in the broader ecosystem, I think some of those individuals that I saw that were really successful, they were very purposeful in somehow getting that kind of sales experience. And some of the ways that I've seen work is one, some of them actually stepped out of just that pure consulting and actually went into more of a services sales role. Right. For a little while, just to try and kind of hone those abilities. I have seen others that have still done their day-to-day consulting job, but they've actually through the business taken the opportunity to form part of sales and pre-sales cycles. So they kind of really understand what's being sold, how it's sold, all those sorts of things. And I think most businesses, particularly SAP, I mean, they are. My experience is that, if you put yourself forward and say, hey, this is a skill set or a gap for me, and I'd really like to, find some ways to fill that, they're going to help. So that'd be my advice.
Sure.
We've kind of entered into this new era where it's like, to get to the next level in your career, you kind of need to be able to sell your skill set quite well and have a personal brand. We're really big on personal branding here. And I think if you're able to go into sales, even for a short amount of time, it massively builds your skill set for your next role.
Well, long gone are the days of the techie sitting in the corner just doing their work. It's definitely more business focused and taking the business on the journey.
That's what we keep hearing is I need like an ABAP developer, but they need to be able to speak to the business. They need to be able to understand requirements. They need to be able to influence. And it's rare that we get roles where that's not in demand anymore.
And I think it's up to leaders as well to create those opportunities, because that's I think, we see a lot of leaders of, say technical or delivery teams. And I think, if you have those people in your team that, maybe they want to develop their sales skills, maybe they don't go and do a sales job. Maybe you just give them the opportunity to be more customer facing, right? So they're they're engaging with customers more often, and doing those sorts of things. So there's a lot of different ways, and I think you're absolutely right. It's a skill set that's invaluable no matter what the role.
100%. So what's the number one piece of advice you would give to the next generation who wants to build their career generally? So not just in sales, but generally. in the SAP ecosystem.
I would say, so a couple of things. I would say, understand business, right? And what I'll elaborate on that a little bit. In my experience at SAP in particular, but other companies as well, those that were the most successful were the ones that were able to relate to a customer and really understand what they need to move the business forward. Okay, they actually understand business. And again, that was one of my drivers coming from my family's business, right? Because I know that you can make one or two small changes and you can change the outcome of a business really significantly. Okay, so I think number one is, find a way to really understand business. Don't just focus on selling software, right? Because that is, customers can see it as well. I think the other thing in terms of building your brand and what you want to do, I think if you look at SAP and really any business, I mean, if you have a skill set that can grow the business and you really focus on that, that's going to get noticed. Yeah. And I think a lot of folk, to be blunt, I mean, may focus on, playing politics or, all these other different things on the fringe. Whereas, if you're intently focused on how can I grow my customer's business, within SAP, because that was the example, you sort of gave me, where is the business going? What's their strategy? What is the skill set that I have that can really grow that strategy? And also, I think just communicate. I've worked with a lot of individuals, highly talented, but didn't probably speak out enough, right? Not in an arrogant way, but just to say, hey, I think I can add value in this area. What do you think?
So being able to articulate yourself really well, being able to understand holistically how your decisions affect the business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, too often we've seen that, people leave a business, for example, and think, oh, look, I wasn't recognized or I wasn't promoted. And, quite often the question asked is, well, what did you do? Right? Did you have that conversation with your management or put your hand up and say, hey, I'd love some more responsibility, or hey, I think I've got the skill set that can really help.
Greg Savage talks about that. Is that what you were thinking of?
Well, we had a conversation internally the other day, because this is a recruitment related matter, but we're getting a lot of, or the industry's seeing a lot of dropouts. And what a dropout is someone that signed a contract and then decide against it. And the number one thing we've identified was initial stage of interviewing a candidate. We asked them, have you had a conversation with your boss?
Yeah. And
it might be a pay-related matter, or it might be a position-related matter, or a promotion-related matter that's driving them away. It's like, hang on a minute, basically what you said, what have you done? And that's going to really help, I think, moving forward. Yeah,
look, there's definitely an onus on the individual to communicate as well, yeah.
I think we have to be really careful, because the culture with leadership is changing very much, where a lot of the onus is on leaders to help individuals advance their careers. And I think that's amazing. But at the same time, we can't let the pendulum swing too far the other way. Like, it's also up to the individual to recognize what they want out of their career and to speak up and to upskill in those areas and not be quiet about it and expect the recognition to be handed to them, essentially. You've got to take control of your own career.
And look, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a massive onus on leadership, but again, I think on both sides, it comes down to communication, right?
Yep.
I mean, as leaders, we have to create the environments and the cadence, right, where we have those career conversations. I think as a leader, if you don't, then that's kind of on you.
Yeah,
right?
Then that's managing, not leading.
Correct.
Coming towards the end of the podcast, Aidan, and you mentioned earlier you've had a lot of good mentors for your career, but what I'd love to know is who's been the biggest inspiration in your career, and why?
Look, there's a few. I mean, look, without naming names, I mean, look, I've been very fortunate. I've had a number of mentors that have really, from a young age, kind of taken me under their wing and been, I think, brutally, honest with me. in their feedback as well. And if I look back at some of those, obviously look all those, I'm good mates with them today. Again, going back to the balance, I think the guys that I admire the most are those that have managed to build a really, really successful career without, the rest of their life, sort of falling to pieces. Or not the rest of their life, but necessarily the other buckets.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And I think, and there are a number of them where I look at, building successful careers, manage to, have really good relationships, in other areas of their life, invest in other areas. And look, for some, I don't know where they get the time in the day to actually fit it all in, but they seem to, but they kind of seem to. So yeah, look, that's the biggest inspiration for me is those sorts of, men and women that are able to, get that balance, but at the same time, build a really successful career.
Excellent.
Love that.
Aidan, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you for coming in today.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I was just saying off air, then I've learned a hell of a lot, especially with that perspective piece. And so, I do thank you. And Bethany, it's good to have you down in Melbourne as well.
I know.
Down in Sydney even. Down from Melbourne to Sydney.
Now you have to come to Melbourne next time. That was a Freudian slip because you have to come.
Okay, no problem.
No, thanks guys. Pleasure.